Imagine waking up in a steel tube about the size of the back section of a bus. The air around you is close to 30 degrees Celsius, thick and humid, condensation running down the bulkhead beside your bunk. You are lying on a ship, on the surface of the North Sea, and yet your body is sitting at 9 times normal atmospheric pressure, exactly matching the seabed 100 meters below you. You go to say good morning to the man in the next bunk, and what comes out is not your voice. It is thin, squeaky, faintly ridiculous, because you are breathing helium. Here's the part most people do not realize. You are not underwater. That chamber never leaves the ship. But if there were a fire on deck right now, you could not simply walk off. Getting you back to normal pressure without killing you takes days. So how does anyone live like that for 28 days? That is exactly what we are going to find out today. Hi, my name is Jack, and this is Life at Sea, the channel where we go inside the lives of the people who live and work at sea. To understand how someone lives at 100 meters for a month, you first have to understand who we are really talking about here, and it is a far smaller group than most people assume. This is not recreational diving. This is not even standard commercial air diving, where you go down, do your job, and come back to the surface at the end of your shift. This is saturation diving, SAT for short, and by industry estimates, there are only around 250 commercial saturation divers working the North Sea in any given year. Today, we are going inside their world, their chamber, their routine, and their month. So let us start with what it actually takes to put a human being on the bottom of the North Sea. The whole thing exists because of one stubborn piece of physics. When you breathe gas under pressure, that gas dissolves into your blood and your tissues. Come up too fast and it fizzes out like a shaken bottle, which is the bends, and it can cripple or kill you. Normally that means every dive ends with a slow, careful ascent. But there is a limit. Once your tissues have absorbed as much gas as they physically can, you are saturated. And here is the clever part. From that point, your decompression time is fixed. It does not matter if you stay 1 more hour or 3 more weeks. It is the same journey home. So the industry made a decision. Stop bringing the divers up, put them under pressure once, keep them there for the whole job, and bring them back once at the end. Getting them down is called blowdown, and it happens at roughly 1 minute per meter. The average working depth in the North Sea sits somewhere around 90 meters, so that is about an hour and a half of steadily increasing pressure. It is not pleasant. The chamber heats up as the gas compresses, and divers describe their bigger joints feeling tight as the slower tissues catch up with the fast ones. They are not breathing air either. At those depths, air turns narcotic and eventually toxic, so they breathe heliox, a mixture of helium and oxygen. That solves one problem and immediately creates 2 more. The first one is heat. Helium strips warmth off human skin far faster than air does. That is why the living chambers are kept between roughly 29 and 34 degrees Celsius, depending on depth, and why divers can genuinely feel a single degree of change. In a heliox chamber, cold is not discomfort. It is a medical emergency. And the reverse is true too. In 1975, on a rig called the Waj Drill 2 in the East Shetland Basin, 2 divers died of heat stroke after their chamber was accidentally pressurized with helium. That is how narrow the window is. The second problem is the voice. Helium wrecks human speech to the point of near unintelligibility at depth, which matters enormously when the person telling you what to do is on the other end of a wire. Then there is the space. On a modern system, the living chambers are around 2.4 meters in internal diameter, sleeping 3 or 6 men. One diver interviewed for a Norwegian study of the profession described it plainly. 3 to 6 men living together in 8 to 12 square meters for 4 weeks. Another put the isolation this way, and it has stuck with me ever since I read it. It is quicker to get back from the moon than it is from the depths we work at. From a 90-meter job, decompression alone takes just over 4 days, and that is before you get in the water, where the seabed silt can reduce visibility to essentially nothing, where the current loads your body the entire shift, and where you sometimes work purely by feel, sunk into soft bottom up to your waist. Any veteran bosun who has done a North Atlantic winter knows that sea is unforgiving. Sat divers meet a version of it that almost no other seafarer ever sees. So how on earth is any of that survivable? It comes down to 3 things, and honestly, none of them are what people expect. The first is the system itself and how a ship becomes a pressurized house. A saturation spread is not one chamber, it is a small connected village of them built into the hull or onto the deck of a dive support vessel. There are the living chambers where the divers sleep and eat. There is the wet pot, a smaller chamber holding the toilet, the sink, the shower, and an equipment lock. Connecting all of it is a run of tunnels the divers call trunking, which one of them described as being much like a hamster tube. And attached to the whole assembly is the bell, plus a hyperbaric lifeboat. Some of these systems are genuinely enormous. Subsea 7's 7 Atlantic carries a 24-person saturation system with 4 3-man twin-lock living chambers, 2 6-man decompression chambers, and the ability to split at the center line so 2 separate crews can work at 2 different depths at the same time. The Scandi Arctic runs a complex rated to 350 meters with 2 3-man bells and 2 18-man hyperbaric lifeboats. But the important part is not the steel. It is the people outside it. Every breath of that atmosphere, every degree of temperature, the oxygen content, the gas monitoring, even the operation of the toilet valves, is run from a station called SAT Control by a life support supervisor and a team of technicians. Boskalis, which operates a fleet of these vessels, describes a 6-man life support team dedicated to nothing else, which means the divers are not really operating this machine. They are living inside it as passengers while other people keep them alive. That is the deal you sign. The second is the 4-shift clock that makes 28 days survivable. Diving runs 24 hours a day, covered by 4 shifts. Divers work in teams of 3. 2 go into the water, and 1 stays in the bell as the bellman, paying out their umbilicals and watching them. A working day, described by a North Sea saturation diver in his own words, goes roughly like this. Breakfast arrives at 7 in the morning through a hatch in the chamber wall. The dive supervisor gives the job brief over the chamber communications. At 8:30, the bellman climbs into the bell and spends 15 minutes checking that the gas is flowing correctly and that the emergency supply will kick in automatically if the primary fails. Then the other 2 divers get in, the bell is sealed, detached, and lowered through the moon pool, a hole in the bottom of the ship, until it reaches working depth. Divers cannot spend more than 6 hours in the water. They come back into the bell one at a time for a 15-minute drink break between the 3rd and 4th hours. Then, 6 hours after they started, the next team arrives on the bottom in a separate bell to relieve them, and they go home to the chamber. And here is the detail that I think matters most. The rotation is 2 days diving, then 1 day as bellman. That built-in day out of the water every 3rd day is a huge part of why a human body can absorb 4 weeks of this. Most experienced life support technicians will tell you plainly that the clock is not paperwork. The clock is the safety system. The third is the hot water suit, the hat, and the umbilical. When a diver leaves the bell, everything keeping him functional runs down a single thick umbilical. Breathing gas, power for his light and his camera, communications, and hot water. That hot water goes into a suit made of 6mm neoprene,
pumped in and vented out through pierced holes across the body. One diver described the sensation as being like having a hot shower inside your suit, which sounds lovely until you remember why it is there. Helium is pulling heat out of him the entire time. Companies like Northern Diver build these suits specifically for saturation work, with distribution valves designed to spread the flow properly. On his head is a Kirby Morgan 17, a fiberglass helmet with a glass faceplate that has been the industry workhorse for decades. And sitting quietly between the diver and every single instruction he receives is a helium speech unscrambler made by outfits like JFD in Aberdeen or Emenco in Norway, running digital processing that models what pressure does to the human vocal tract and rebuilds the words on the other side. Honestly, the fact that we solved the problem of putting a person at 100 meters with a rubber suit full of warm water and a box that fixes his voice is one of my favorite pieces of engineering in this entire industry. Now let us talk about the small things that make a month in a steel tube possible. Now, this is the part I actually find most interesting because the engineering only gets you so far. What gets a person through 28 days is much smaller than that. Every diver gets a box, one small personal box in the living area, and that is your territory for the month. Researchers who interviewed North Sea SAT divers found that this tiny allocation of space, and everyone respecting it, mattered enormously. Then there are the routines. One diver in that same study talked about his cardamom tea and how running out of it could feel like the end of the world, while openly admitting he tries not to let it become that important to him. Others bring magnets so they can stick photographs of their families to the chamber wall. Meals arrive through the medical lock, a small steel tube welded into the side of the chamber with a hatch at each end. Nothing can be cooked inside. The outgassing would contaminate the atmosphere and the fire risk is unacceptable, so every meal is prepared in the ship's galley, sealed into the lock, brought up to chamber pressure, and passed through. Dirty plates, cutlery, and laundry go back out the same way. Divers eat a lot, up to around 6,000 calories a day, because the body burns hard under pressure. There is a projector screen in some chambers. One diver described the generational shift beautifully. When he started, his bag was full of books and spare batteries for a Walkman. Now it is an iPad loaded with films. There is a comms box at each bunk, so SAT control can reach any individual diver, and a lot of them wear a dive watch with a helium escape valve, not because they need it, since the supervisor runs the dive, but because it is nice to know how long you have left even when you cannot do anything about it. And then there is cleaning, which sounds trivial and absolutely is not. Industry medical guidance sets out that the toilet, sink, shower, lock areas, and table surfaces are cleaned every single day, that the walls and the breathing masks are done twice a week, and that shower heads are removed and cleaned on the surface. In a sealed, warm, humid box, infection control is not housekeeping, it is safety. What strikes me about all of this is what the researchers concluded. These personal routines are how divers manufacture a sense of control in an environment where they control almost nothing, not even when they eat or when the toilet flushes. Ask any old SAT diver what he actually packs, and you will barely hear a word about diving gear. Now look, this would not be a Life at Sea video if we were not completely straight with you about both sides. So, let us be honest. The single most common word divers use about the chamber is not danger, it is monotony. One described it as Groundhog Day, every day in there the same. Another said every day in the chamber is a Monday, and every day at home is a Saturday. Being able to absorb that is what actually filters people out of this profession. Then there is the family cost, and it is heavy. Missed birthdays, missed funerals, Work sprung on you with a week's notice, then delayed a week, then delayed again, while you have already told your daughter you are leaving. One diver said openly that relationships dissolving is common in this trade, and that the work situation is a big part of why. Another described needing about a week after coming out of the chamber before he was thinking straight again, describing himself as snappy and aggressive in the meantime. Living with 5 other men in a small box for a month has its own arithmetic. In week 1, nothing bothers you. By week 4, the sound of a man chewing on his spoon can genuinely be too much. Teams are deliberately assembled by the supervisor and the offshore construction manager to try to avoid that. The body pays too. Decompression itself is a strain, with divers reporting joint pain, headaches, and breathlessness. A common cold before blowdown can end a career because trapped air in blocked sinuses cannot be equalized. And sometimes it goes properly wrong. In September 2012, on a job at 90 meters in the North Sea, a dive support vessel's dynamic positioning system failed. The ship drifted off station, one diver's umbilical snagged on a structure and was severed completely, and he was recovered into the bell 33 minutes later. Remarkably, he came out of it without neurological injury. Decompression for all 12 divers in that system afterwards took 78 hours, which raises the obvious question: what happens if the ship itself has to be abandoned? The answer is a self-propelled hyperbaric lifeboat, which is exactly what it sounds like. A lifeboat with a pressure chamber built inside it, capable of keeping divers at depth and alive for roughly 72 hours while somebody works out where to take them. It is worth asking where all of this is going. Here is something that surprises a lot of people. There is no single global answer to how long a human should stay saturated. In the UK sector of the North Sea, the limit is 28 days, down to 180 meters. Cross into the Norwegian sector, and it drops to 21. Medical guidance to the industry states that saturation should not normally exceed 28 days at all, and that any extension requires written agreement from the diving contractor's medical advisor, the divers themselves, and the supervisors. Same sea, same weather. 2 different answers, which is why so many vessels, the 7 Atlantic and the Scandi Arctic among them, are built to the stricter Norwegian Norsok standard so they can work either side of the line. That variation matters less than it used to, though. A 2024 study in International Maritime Health compared Boskalis saturation procedures against Norsok procedures in the Danish sector and found no statistical difference in diver stress markers. Different operating cultures converging on the same outcome. It is worth remembering how recent all of this is. A former health and safety executive inspector described North Sea diving in the 1970s as the Klondike, and the numbers back him up. The North Sea Divers Alliance counts 56 confirmed diving fatalities from that pioneer era. In 1983, an explosive decompression on the Byford Dolphin killed 5 men in a single instant and permanently changed how the industry thinks about saturation risk. Today, the same work happens under the Diving at Work Regulations 1997, the Approved Code of Practice, and the International Marine Contractors Association Code of Practice for Offshore Diving. That is a genuinely remarkable distance to travel in 50 years. As for the future, remotely operated vehicles keep taking work away, and divers know their industry is tied to oil and gas. But there is still work that needs hands, judgment, and precision that no machine currently offers, and decommissioning old North Sea infrastructure is keeping bells in the water for now. So here is what I take from all of it. The extraordinary thing about saturation diving is not the depth. It is not even the pressure. It is that a group of people worked out how to turn a sealed steel cylinder full of helium into somewhere a human being can eat breakfast, do a hard day's work, watch a film, sleep, and then do it again for 28 days without falling apart. The engineering is the headline, but the box of tea, the magnets holding up a photograph, and the 1 day in 3 out of the water are what actually get people home. Every experienced set diver will tell you the water is the easy part. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to Life at Sea for a lot more content just like this. And if you have worked offshore, supported a SAT spread, or you know someone who has done a full hitch in the chamber, drop it in the comments below. I would genuinely love to hear it. Thanks for watching.